The once pristine quarters of the alien vessel were now smeared with the dark indigo blood of its inhabitants. Dozens of peaceful Vians lay slaughtered by the ruthless band of Gorto raiders who had boarded their ship. Cruel laughter echoed through the halls as the bandits reveled in the massacre. Only one Vian still drew breath, a striking young female named Aelia. Her emerald skin was marred with bruises and cuts from the rough hands of her captors. They dragged her trembling form onto the bridge, forcing her to kneel before their leering leader. "Looks like we saved the best for last, boys," Craig sneered, grabbing Aelia's face and turning it side to side. "This little beauty will provide some entertainment before we space her like the rest." Aelia shuddered at his touch, her long, pointed ears drooping in fear and revulsion. She knew Craig's reputation as a sadistic butcher. The Gorto bandits were the scourge of the Orion Arm, leaving a trail of death and destruction wherever their ramshackle fleet ventured. Craig drew a wicked curved blade, tracing it almost gently along Aelia's cheek as he grinned. "Such a waste to carve up this pretty green skin," he said. "But no witnesses means no one to cut into our profits." He raised the dagger, preparing to plunge it into Aelia's heart. She closed her eyes, not wanting the cruel face of her murderer to be the last thing she ever saw. Suddenly, a concussive blast rocked the ship, throwing the Gorto off their feet. Aelia's eyes flew open to see an armored figure storm onto the bridge, a massive pulse rifle in his hands. He moved with purpose and precision, dispatching the bandits with ruthless efficiency. When the last Gorto lay dead, the armored man turned to face Aelia. He pulled off his helmet, revealing a chiseled human face with piercing blue eyes. Aelia gasped. She had never seen a human in person before, only heard tales of their strength and cunning. The man looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "Looks like I arrived just in time," he said, surveying the carnage grimly. "Though it seems I missed one hell of a party." "Thank you," Aelia managed to stammer out, her voice shaking. "I thought I was dead." The bounty hunter shrugged. "Don't go thanking me yet. Craig and his boys picked a bad time to be in my way. I'm just here for the bounty on his head." He turned to leave, but Aelia called out desperately, "Wait, please. You can't leave me here alone. My people, my family, they're all gone." The man paused, conflict playing across his rugged features. He clearly hadn't planned on taking on any passengers. But looking at Aelia's pleading amber eyes, remembering the terror he'd seen in them moments ago, he found he couldn't just abandon her to her fate. "Ah, hell," he muttered. "Fine. You can tag along until we reach the next port, but don't expect any charity, Princess. We'll have to stop for fuel and supplies, and you'll have to pull your weight." Aelia nodded vigorously, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Of course, anything. You won't regret this, I promise." The bounty hunter sighed, already starting to regret his decision. "I'm Cade, by the way. Now let's get moving before any more scum show up to pick the bones here." He led Aelia back to his ship, the Renegade, its battle-scarred hull a stark contrast to the sleek alien craft. As they prepared to disembark, Cade couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. Glancing over at Aelia, huddled in the co-pilot seat, he wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Little did he know, this fateful rescue would send them hurtling across the stars on an adventure beyond anything he could imagine. The course of both their lives had just been irrevocably altered. Two lost souls, human and alien, bound together by the unpredictable currents of fate and the unforgiving void of space. The Renegade tore through the inky void, putting as much distance as possible between them and the grisly scene they'd left behind. Cade sat at the controls, his jaw set in a grim line as he navigated the star-trunk expanse. Beside him, Aelia huddled in silence, still processing the shock and trauma of all that had transpired. As the adrenaline began to fade, the weight of her loss crashed over Aelia like a tidal wave. Her family, her friends, her entire world had been brutally ripped away in a matter of hours. Tears streamed down her face as great, racking sobs shook her slender frame. Cade shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure how to handle the alien girl's raw display of grief. He was a man of action, not comfort. Bounty hunting required a certain emotional detachment, a skill he'd honed to perfection over the years. But seeing Aelia's anguish stirred something in him, a flicker of empathy he thought long extinguished. Clearing his throat awkwardly, Cade broke the heavy silence. Hey, I'm sorry about your people. That's a rough hand to be dealt. Alia looked up at him, her amber eyes glistening with tears. I just can't believe they're gone. My whole life, everything I knew, it's all been taken from me. Cade nodded, his gaze distant. I know a thing or two about loss myself. It's a hell of a thing, but you'll survive. You have to. Alia studied him curiously, sensing a deeper pain beneath his gruff exterior. What happened to you? She asked softly. Cade's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening on the controls. For a long moment, Alia thought he wouldn't answer, but then, to her surprise, he began to speak. I had a family once, a wife, a little girl. They were my whole world. His voice was low and rough, as if the words were being dragged out of him against his will. We lived on a colony at the edge of the frontier. It was a hard life, but a good one, until the day the raiders came. Cade's eyes hardened, a cold, old fury burning in their depths. They slaughtered everyone, burned the whole damn settlement to the ground. I was out on a hunt. Didn't get back until it was too late. By the time I arrived, there was nothing left but ashes and bones. Alia gasped, her heart aching for the pain he must have endured. Impulsively, she reached out to lay a comforting hand on his arm. To her surprise, Cade didn't pull away. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I can't even imagine. Cade shrugged, but there was a new rawness to his voice when he spoke. It was a long time ago, but I swore from that day forward I'd hunt down every last one of the bastards responsible, make them pay for what they took from me. Alia nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's why you were after Craig. He was one of them, wasn't he? Cade's smile was cold and hard. Damn right he was. And now there's one less piece of scum sullying the galaxy. A heavy silence fell between them, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. But there was a new understanding there, a shared bond of grief and loss that transcended the vast differences of their species. As the renegade hurtled onwards through the star-strewn expanse, Cade and Alia both felt the stirrings of something new and unexpected, the tentative beginnings of trust, perhaps even the seeds of friendship. In the cold, unforgiving reaches of space, it was a precious thing indeed. But little did they know, their journey was only just beginning. The ghosts of the past and the dangers of the present would soon collide, testing the strength of their newfound connection in ways neither could imagine. The void of space was a harsh mistress, and she suffered no illusions. Only the strong survived in her pitiless embrace. The renegade docked at Omega Station, a seedy hub of criminal activity spinning at the edge of civilized space. Cade had been here before, usually when a job required less than legal resources or information. It was the kind of place where everyone had a price and no one asked too many questions. As they stepped off the ship, Alia's eyes widened at the chaotic swirl of alien life that greeted them. Dozens of species mingled in the grimy corridors, haggling, drinking, and brawling with equal enthusiasm. The air was thick with the acrid scent of fuel, sweat, and cheap booze. Cade kept a watchful eye on his ally as they navigated the crowds. Her exotic beauty and wide-eyed innocence made her a prime target in a place like this. He found himself feeling strangely protective of the alien girl, a sentiment he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Stay close and keep your head down, he muttered, guiding her through the throng with a hand on the small of her back. This isn't the kind of place you want to attract attention. Alia nodded, sticking close to Cade's side as they made their way to a dingy bar in the station's lower levels. The sign above the door read, "The Rusty Nail," in flickering neon. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and the sour stench of stale beer. Patrons of all shapes and sizes lounged in shadowy booths, nursing drinks and conducting shady deals in hushed tones. Cade led Alia to the bar, where a grizzled old human with a cybernetic eye was polishing glasses with a dirty rag. He looked up as they approached, his good eye narrowing in recognition. Well, if it isn't Cade Howell," he rasped, a crooked grin splitting his weathered face. "Thought you were dead, you old bastard." Cade snorted, sliding onto a stool. "You should know by now, Mac, I'm too mean to die." Mac chuckled, his gaze sliding to Alia. "And who's the green bean?" Didn't think you were the type to take on strays." Aelia bristled at the condescending nickname, but Cade shot her a warning look. "She's a client. I'm just getting her to the next port, that's all." Mac shrugged, clearly losing interest. "So, what brings you to my humble establishment? I'm guessing it ain't the ambiance." Cade leaned in, his voice low. "I need information. Heard any chatter about the Gorto gang lately? Any idea where they might be holed up?" Mac's cybernetic eye whirred as he considered the question. "Might be. I have, but you know the drill, Howell. Information don't come free, even for old friends." Cade sighed, reaching into his pocket and sliding a credit chip across the bar. "Start talking, Mac, and it better be good." As Mac began to spill what he knew, Aelia let her gaze wander around the bar. Suddenly, her blood ran cold. There, in a shadowy corner booth, sat a group of Gorto raiders, their cruel eyes fixed directly on her. She tugged urgently at Cade's sleeve, her voice a panicked whisper. "Cade, we need to go now." Cade followed her gaze, his face hardening as he saw the Gorto. "Looks like Craig's boys are out for blood." He stood abruptly, his hand dropping to the blaster at his hip. The Gorto rose to meet him, drawing their own weapons with a chorus of menacing clicks. The bar erupted into chaos as patrons dove for cover, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Cade shoved Aelia behind him, his eyes never leaving the advancing Gorto. "When I say run, you run," he growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Get back to the ship and prep for takeoff." Aelia nodded frantically, her heart pounding in her throat. She knew Cade was a skilled fighter, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Fear coursed through her veins, but beneath it, a flicker of something else began to grow. A fierce determination to survive, to fight back against those who had taken everything from her. As the first shots rang out and the acrid scent of blaster fire filled the air, Aelia realized that her fate was now inextricably tied to Cade's. They would have to rely on each other, trust each other, if they hoped to make it out of this alive. And deep down, in a part of herself she barely recognized, Aelia found that the idea didn't scare her nearly as much as it should have. In fact, it almost felt right. Blaster fire scorched the air as Cade and the Gorto raiders traded shots across the bar. Patrons screamed and dove for cover, glasses shattering and tables overturning in the chaos. Cade moved with fluid grace, his shots precise and deadly. 2 Gorto fell before they could even raise their weapons, smoking holes in their chests. But there were too many, even for him. A bolt grazed his shoulder, the searing pain only fueling his determination. "Aelia, go!" he roared, laying down a barrage of covering fire. Aelia hesitated for a split second, torn between the instinct to flee and the desperate desire to stand and fight beside Cade. But the look in his eyes broke no argument. She turned and ran, weaving through the panicked crowd as blaster bolts whizzed past her head. Her heart pounded in her throat, adrenaline surging through her veins. She burst out of the bar and into the grimy corridor, racing towards the docking bay where the renegade awaited. Behind her, Cade was a one-man army, his blaster spitting death with every shot. But the Gorto kept coming, heedless of their fallen comrades. A bolt caught Cade in the thigh, sending him stumbling back against the bar. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he fired relentlessly, determined to buy Aelia as much time as he could. Aelia reached the renegade, her fingers flying over the controls as she prepped the ship for takeoff. The engines roared to life, the deck vibrating beneath her feet. She prayed Cade would make it back in time. Just as the Gorto began to close in, Cade tossed a flash grenade into their midst. The explosion rocked the bar, blinding light and concussive force, sending the raiders reeling. Seizing his chance, Cade limped towards the exit, his wounded legs screaming with every step. He stumbled into the corridor, his vision swimming from blood loss and pain. The renegade was just ahead, its engines roaring like an impatient beast. He could see Aelia in the cockpit, her face a mask of fear and determination. With a final burst of strength, Cade hurled himself through the open hatch, collapsing onto the deck in a heap. "Go!" he gasped, his voice ragged with pain. Aelia punched the thrusters, the renegade leaping forward like a startled gazelle. Blaster fire pinged off the hull as the Gorto poured out of the bar, but it was too late. The ship rocketed out of the docking bay and into the starry void beyond. In the cockpit, Alia let out a shuddering breath, her hands shaking on the controls. They had made it, barely. She glanced back at Cade, who lay slumped against the bulkhead, his face pale and slick with sweat. A dark stain was spreading across his thigh where the blaster bolt had struck him. "Cade!" she cried, scrambling out of the pilot's seat and kneeling beside him. "You're hurt." Cade managed a weak grin, his blue eyes hazy with pain. "Just a scratch. I've had worse." But Alia could see the severity of the wound, the way his life force was seeping out with every passing second. A cold fear gripped her heart. She couldn't lose him. Not now, not after everything they'd been through. With trembling hands, she tore strips from her tunic, fashioning a makeshift tourniquet around Cade's thigh. He grunted in pain as she pulled it tight but didn't protest. "You're going to be okay," Alia whispered, as much to herself as to him. "I'll get you patched up. Just hold on." Cade reached up, his calloused hand cupping her cheek. "You did good back there, Princess, real good." Alia leaned into his touch, tears stinging her eyes. In that moment, she realized just how much the gruff, battle-hardened bounty hunter had come to mean to her. He was more than just her rescuer, more than just a means of survival. He was her friend, maybe even more. She pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. Cade needed medical attention, and fast. She would have to be strong for both of them now. As the renegade hurtled through the void, Alia tended to Cade's wounds. Her gentle hands belied the steel in her heart. They had survived this battle, but she knew it was only the beginning. The Gorto would be hunting them now, seeking revenge for their fallen brethren. And somewhere out there, the mastermind behind the slaughter of Alia's people was still at large, a shadow waiting to strike. The renegade drifted through the inky void, its engines humming a gentle lullaby. In the dimly lit medbay, Alia attended to Cade's wounds, her slender fingers working with a delicate precision that belied her inner turmoil. Cade lay on the examination table, his rugged features drawn with pain and exhaustion. The blaster wound in his thigh had been deep, but thanks to Alia's quick thinking and the ship's well-stocked medical supplies, the bleeding had been staunched and the worst of the damage repaired. As she finished applying the last of the regenerative salve, Alia let her hand linger on Cade's chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palm. It was a reassuring sensation, a tangible reminder that despite everything they'd endured, they were still alive, still fighting. Cade's eyes fluttered open, hazy with pain and medication. "Hey, Princess," he rasped, his voice rough with disuse. "Guess I owe you one." Alia managed a small smile, her amber eyes soft with concern. "You saved my life back on the station. Consider us even." Cade chuckled, then winced as the movement pulled at his wound. "Damn, Gorto. They just don't know when to quit." Alia's face darkened, a flicker of anger sparking in her eyes. "They slaughtered my people, Cade. Butchered them like animals. I can't just let that go." Cade reached up, his calloused hand cupping her cheek. "We'll make them pay, Alia. I promise you that. But we need to be smart about it. We can't take on the whole damn gang alone." Alia leaned into his touch, drawing strength from the contact. "I know, but I can't just sit back and do nothing. Not anymore." Cade's blue eyes held hers, a fierce intensity burning in their depths. "You're not alone in this, Princess. I'm with you every step of the way. We're a team now. You and me." Alia felt a sudden rush of emotion, a swelling in her chest that had nothing to do with the adrenaline of their narrow escape. In that moment, she knew that her feelings for Cade ran deeper than mere gratitude or camaraderie. She opened her mouth to speak, to give voice to the tangled knot of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. But before she could utter a word, the ship's comm system crackled to life, shattering the intimate moment. "Unidentified vessel, this is the Galactic Patrol. You are harboring a fugitive wanted for questioning in connection with the massacre on Visoth Prime. Prepare to be boarded." Cade and Alia exchanged a look of pure disbelief. The Galactic Patrol? Here, now? Cade struggled to sit up, his face twisting with pain and determination. "They must have tracked us from Omega Station. Damn it, I thought we'd lost them." Alia's mind raced, 1,000 possibilities whirling through her thoughts. The Galactic Patrol was known for their relentless pursuit of justice, their unwavering commitment to the rule of law. If they took her and Cade into custody, it could mean the end of their quest for vengeance against the Gorto. But then, like a bolt of lightning, a sudden realization struck her. The patrol said I was wanted for questioning in connection with the massacre on Visoth Prime, Aelia breathed, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. They think I had something to do with the attack on my people. They don't know I'm a survivor. Cade's eyes widened, the implications of her words sinking in. If we can convince them of the truth, get them on our side, we might just stand a chance of bringing the Gorto to justice. Aelia finished, a fierce determination settling over her features. Exactly. We need to convince them we're not the enemy. We need their help. Cade grinned, a feral light dancing in his eyes. Well then, Princess, let's go have a chat with the law. As the renegade shuddered under the docking clamps of the patrol cruiser, Cade and Aelia prepared to face their most daunting challenge yet, convincing the galaxy's most uncompromising enforcers that they were not the enemy, but the key to unlocking a conspiracy that threatened the very fabric of interstellar peace. It would take every ounce of their cunning, their bravery, and their unbreakable bond to navigate the treacherous waters ahead. But they had each other, and the indestructible spirit of humanity burning in their hearts, and in the end, that would be enough. It had to be, for the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. A galaxy plunged into chaos, the Gorto's reign of terror unchecked, and the memory of Aelia's people forever lost to the unforgiving void. No failure was not an option, not now, not ever. The Galactic Patrol wanted answers. Well, they were about to get them, and may the stars have mercy on anyone who stood in their way. The interior of the Galactic Patrol cruiser was a stark contrast to the gritty, lived-in confines of the Renegade. Gleaming corridors stretched out before Cade and Aelia, all polished metal and harsh clinical light. Armed guards flanked them on either side, their faces impassive beneath their tinted helmets. Cade walked with a slight limp, his wounded leg still tender despite Aelia's ministrations. But he held his head high, his shoulders squared in defiance. He'd be damned if he'd show weakness in front of these bureaucratic stiffs. Aelia, for her part, was a picture of regal composure. Her emerald skin seemed to glow under the artificial lights, her amber eyes clear and focused. If she felt any fear or trepidation, she did not show it. They were led into a stark interrogation room, all bare walls and a single metal table. A man in a crisp patrol uniform awaited them, his face lined with age and authority. He gestured for them to sit, his expression unreadable. "I am Commander Thorn of the Galactic Patrol," he began, his voice a gravelly rumble. "And you two have a lot of explaining to do." Cade leaned forward, his blue eyes flashing with intensity. "Look, Commander, there's been a misunderstanding. Aelia here is a victim, not a suspect. The Gorto massacred her people, and we've been trying to bring them to justice." Thorn arched a skeptical eyebrow. "And you expect me to just take your word for it? The Gorto are a known criminal element, true, but they've never been linked to an atrocity of this scale before." Aelia spoke up, her voice clear and steady. "I was there, Commander. I saw it with my own eyes. The Gorto slaughtered my family, my friends, everyone I ever knew. I barely escaped with my life." She reached into her pocket, withdrawing a small data chip. "This contains security footage from the Vision ship. It shows the Gorto attacking, killing indiscriminately. If you watch it, you'll see the truth." Thorn took the chip, turning it over in his fingers. "And how do I know this isn't fabricated? A clever forgery to cover your own tracks?" Cade bristled, his temper flaring. "You think she'd go to all this trouble to fake her own people's deaths? What the hell kind of sense does that make?" Thorn held up a placating hand. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Howell. The patrol has to consider every angle, follow every lead. We can't afford to take anything at face value." He inserted the chip into a slot on the table, a holographic display springing to life above the surface. Grainy images played out, showing the brutal efficiency of the Gorto attack, the merciless slaughter of the Vision crew. Aelia watched, her heart clenching with fresh grief and rage. Beside her, Cade's fist clenched, his jaw tight with barely suppressed fury. As the footage ended, Thorne sat back, his expression thoughtful. This is compelling evidence, I'll admit. But it still doesn't explain your involvement, Mr. Howell. What's your stake in all this? Cade met the commander's gaze unflinchingly. The Gorto killed my family too, burned my home world to ashes. I've been hunting them ever since, trying to make them pay for what they did. He reached out, taking Alia's hand in his own. When I found Alia and saw what they'd done to her people, I knew I couldn't just walk away. This fight is bigger than just me now. It's about justice, about making sure no one else has to suffer like we have. Thorne was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching their faces for any hint of deception. Finally, he nodded, as if coming to a decision. All right, I believe you. The patrol will do everything in its power to bring the Gorto to justice. But we have to do this by the book, follow proper channels and protocols. Cade opened his mouth to protest, but Alia squeezed his hand, silencing him. We understand, Commander, and we're grateful for your help. But please, don't underestimate the Gorto. They're ruthless, and they'll stop at nothing to protect their own interests. Thorne's face hardened, a steely resolve settling over his features. Neither will we, Miss Zelia. Neither will we. As they left the interrogation room, Cade and Alia exchanged a look of cautious hope. They had the patrol on their side now, the full might of the law behind them. But they both knew that the real battle was just beginning. The Gorto were a cunning and merciless foe, entrenched in the criminal underworld of a dozen star systems. Rooting them out would take more than just firepower and good intentions. It would take grit, determination, and a willingness to venture into the darkest corners of the galaxy. But they were ready. Ready to fight, ready to bleed, ready to do whatever it took to see justice done for the memory of their fallen loved ones, for the innocent lives shattered by the Gorto's cruelty, and for each other. Always for each other. The stars beckoned, a vast and unforgiving expanse of danger and possibility. Hand in hand, heart to heart, Cade and Alia ventured forth to meet it head-on. The hunt was on. The renegades sliced through the void, a sleek blade cutting through the endless tapestry of stars. In the cockpit, Cade sat at the controls, his eyes fixed on the readouts before him. Beside him, Alia pored over a hollow projection of the galaxy, her brow furrowed in concentration. They had been traveling for days, following the scant leads and whispered rumors that the Galactic Patrol had provided. The Gorto were a slippery bunch, adept at covering their tracks and disappearing into the shadows of the criminal underworld. But Cade and Alia were nothing if not determined. They had a mission, a purpose that drove them forward with relentless focus. They would find the Gorto, and they would make them pay for their crimes. Alia let out a frustrated sigh, collapsing the hollow projection with a wave of her hand. This is getting us nowhere. Every lead we follow just leads to another dead end. Cade glanced over at her, his blue eyes softening with understanding. I know it's frustrating, Princess, but we can't give up now. Not when we're so close. Alia shook her head, her amber eyes flashing with anger. Close, Cade. We don't even know where to look next. The Gorto could be anywhere in the galaxy by now. Cade reached out, taking her hand in his own. Then we keep looking. We keep fighting for as long as it takes. Alia met his gaze, her expression softening. I don't know what I'd do without you, Cade. You've been my rock through all of this. Cade grinned, a roguish glint in his eye. Well, I am pretty amazing. Alia rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. And modest, too. Their banter was interrupted by a sudden ping from the ship's comm system. Cade frowned, tapping the console to accept the incoming transmission. A familiar face flickered into view on the viewscreen, Commander Thorne, looking grim and urgent. Howell, Alia, we've got a situation, Thorne said. Cade leaned forward, his frown deepening. What kind of situation? Thorne's image was replaced by a star chart, a single system highlighted in pulsing red. We've received a distress call from a Visian refugee convoy in the Arcturus system. They're under attack by Gorto raiders. Aelia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Visian refugees? I thought I was the only one left. Thorne's face reappeared, his expression sympathetic. Apparently, a small group managed to escape the massacre on Visoth Prime. They've been in hiding ever since, trying to find a new home. Cade's jaw tightened, a fierce determination settling over his features. "Send us the coordinates, Commander. We're on our way." Thorne nodded, his image already starting to flicker and fade. "Backup is en route, but you'll get there first. Good hunting, you two. And be careful." As the transmission cut out, Cade turned to Aelia, his eyes blazing with intensity. "Looks like we just got our next lead, Princess." Aelia nodded, a grim resolve settling over her features. "If there are Vision survivors out there, I have to help them. I can't let the Gorto take any more of my people." Cade reached out, cupping her cheek in his calloused hand. "We won't let that happen, I promise you, Aelia. We'll save them, and we'll make the Gorto pay for what they've done." As the renegade leapt into hyperspace, the stars blurring into streaks of light, Cade and Aelia prepared themselves for the battle to come. They checked their weapons, donned their armor, and steeled their hearts for the horrors they knew they would face. The Arcturus system was a blaze of chaos and destruction. The Vissian refugee convoy, a ragtag collection of battered freighters and converted passenger liners, hung in space like wounded prey, surrounded by the sleek, predatory shapes of Gorto raiders. Cade's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, his hands flying over the renegade's controls. "Looks like we got here just in time," he said. Aelia leaned forward, her amber eyes wide with horror and rage. "Those monsters, they just can't let my people be." Cade glanced over at her, his expression softening. "We'll stop them, Aelia. I promise you that." He turned back to the controls, his jaw set with grim determination. "All right, Princess, strap in and get ready. This is going to be one hell of a fight." The renegade surged forward, its engines roaring as it plunged into the fray. Cade wove the ship through the chaos with expert precision, dodging incoming fire and returning it with deadly accuracy. Beside him, Aelia manned the weapon systems, her slender fingers dancing over the controls as she unleashed a barrage of missiles and laser fire. Her face was a mask of concentration, her eyes blazing with fierce, righteous anger. Together, they tore through the Gorto raiders like avenging angels, their ship a blur of speed and firepower. The raiders tried to regroup, tried to mount a counterattack, but they were no match for the skill and determination of the human Vissian duo. One by one, the Gorto ships fell, exploding into clouds of debris and flame. The refugees cheered over the comms, their voices thick with relief and gratitude. But even as they celebrated, a new threat emerged from the depths of space. A massive Gorto dreadnought, its hull bristling with weapons and armor, bore down on the convoy like a monstrous predator. Cade's eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. "That thing is a damn fortress. We can't take it head on." Aelia's face was pale, but her voice was steady. "We have to try. We can't let it reach the refugees." Cade nodded, his jaw tight with resolve. "All right, we'll hit it with everything we've got. But if things start looking bad, we bug out. No heroics, you hear me?" Aelia managed a small smile. "No promises." The renegade swung around, facing the dreadnought head-on. Cade punched the thrusters, sending the ship hurtling towards the monstrous vessel at breakneck speed. The dreadnought opened fire, a storm of laser blasts and missile barrages that filled the void with deadly light. Cade jinked and weaved, his hands a blur on the controls as he dodged the incoming fire. Aelia returned fire with everything the renegade had, pouring laser blasts and missiles into the dreadnought's shields. But the monstrous ship barely seemed to notice, its armor absorbing the impacts with contemptuous ease. Cade gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his brow. "It's no use. We can't punch through those shields." Aelia's eyes flashed with sudden inspiration. "The shields, Cade? Aim for the shield generators." Cade blinked, then grinned fiercely. "You're a genius, Princess." He swung the renegade around, diving towards the dreadnought's hull. Aelia targeted the shield generators, pouring fire into the glowing nodes with relentless precision. One by one, the generators exploded, the dreadnought's shields flickering and fading. Cade let out a whoop of triumph, even as the massive ship began to turn its weapons on the renegade. "Time to finish this," he growled, his eyes blazing with determination. He aimed the renegade at the dreadnought's bridge, pouring every last ounce of power into the engines. The ship leapt forward, a blur of speed and fury, as it hurtled towards the Gorto vessel. At the last second, Cade fired the Renegade's remaining missiles, sending them streaking towards the Dreadnought's exposed bridge. The explosions tore through the ship's command center, setting off a chain reaction that ripped the massive vessel apart from the inside out. The Renegade pulled away, barely escaping the shockwave as the Dreadnought exploded into a billion fragments of molten metal and shattered dreams. In the sudden silence that followed, Cade and Aelia could only stare at each other, their hearts pounding with the adrenaline of their narrow escape. Then, slowly, they began to laugh, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy and relief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved the Vision refugees and struck a blow against the Gorto that would be felt across the galaxy. But even as they celebrated, they knew that their fight was far from over. The Gorto were still out there, still a threat to the innocent and the vulnerable, and Cade and Aelia would be there to stop them, always and forever. The Galactic Patrol headquarters was a hive of activity, a bustling metropolis of law and order amidst the chaos of the stars. In a small, unassuming conference room, Cade and Aelia sat across from Commander Thorn, their faces a mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. Thorn leaned back in his chair, his expression one of grudging respect. "You two have done the impossible," Thorn said. "The Gorto criminal empire is in shambles. Their leadership is either dead or in custody. The galaxy owes you a debt of gratitude." Cade shrugged, a wry grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We were just doing our job, Commander, righting wrongs and kicking ass. The usual." Aelia rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "What Cade means to say is that we couldn't have done it without the Patrol's support. You gave us the resources and the intel we needed to take the fight to the Gorto." Thorn nodded, his gaze turning serious. "And now the real work begins. Rebuilding the worlds the Gorto destroyed, bringing aid and comfort to their victims. It will be a long and difficult road." Aelia's expression turned somber, her amber eyes distant. "My people have lost so much. Our homeworld, our culture, our very way of life. But we are strong, and we will endure. With the help of the Patrol and our allies, we will build a new future for ourselves among the stars." Cade reached out, taking her hand in his own. "And I'll be right there beside you every step of the way. I made a promise to see this through to the end, and I intend to keep it." Aelia smiled, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "I know you will, Cade. You've been my rock, my anchor through all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." Thorn cleared his throat, a hint of awkwardness in his expression. "Yes, well, the Patrol is certainly grateful for your service, and we have a proposal for you, if you're interested." Cade arched an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "Oh, do tell, Commander." Thorn leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "We want you to lead a special task force, a team of the best and brightest the Patrol has to offer. Your mission will be to hunt down the remaining Gorto cells and any other threats to galactic peace. You'll have the full resources of the Patrol at your disposal and the authority to act as you see fit." Cade and Aelia exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them in the space of a heartbeat. Finally, Cade turned back to Thorn, a grin spreading across his face. "Where do we sign up?" The observation deck of the Renegade was a symphony of stars, a vast and endless canvas of light and wonder. Cade and Aelia stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the cosmic vista before them. In the weeks since their victory over the Gorto, they had thrown themselves into their new roles as leaders of the galaxy's guardians. There had been missions to plan, threats to assess, and a team to train and mold into a cohesive unit. But in the rare moments of quiet like this one, they found themselves drawn to each other's company, as if by some inexorable force of gravity. Aelia glanced over at Cade, her amber eyes soft and warm. "You know, I never did thank you properly for everything you've done, everything you've been to me." Cade shrugged, a wry grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Hey, it's what partners do, right? We look out for each other." Aelia shook her head, a hint of frustration in her expression. "No, Cade, it's more than that. You've been my rock, my anchor, my everything. I couldn't have made it through any of this without you." Cade's grin faded, replaced by a look of tender sincerity. "Aelia, I, I feel the same way. You've given me a reason to fight, a reason to hope again. Before I met you, I was just a bitter old bounty hunter chasing ghosts and nursing my own wounds. But you showed me that there was still beauty in the universe, still something worth fighting for. He reached out, taking her hand in his own, his calloused fingers intertwining with her slender green ones. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I love you, Aelia. I have for a long time now. Aelia's eyes widened, a gasp escaping her lips. For a moment, she could only stare at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. I love you too, Cade, with all my heart and soul. She leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was at once tender and passionate, playful and sincere. Cade's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close as he deepened the kiss, pouring all of his love and devotion into that one perfect moment. When they finally pulled apart, they were both grinning like fools, their eyes shining with happiness and love. Well, Cade said, his voice rough with emotion, I guess this means we're stuck with each other now, huh? Aelia laughed, a sound of pure, unbridled joy. I wouldn't have it any other way, partner. Hand in hand, they turned back to the stars, their hearts full and their spirits soaring. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever dangers the universe saw fit to throw at them, they would face them together,